Welcome into the post-game show. Rockets get a huge win, 111 to 106 over the San Antonio Spurs, a game that the Rockets were getting run over for much of the game, down by as many as 16 points. Looked like they were dead in the water in this game. There were certainly several heroes in this game, but there's none bigger than Reed Sheppard, who really in late third quarter, early fourth quarter stepped up big. The Spurs went from incredibly hot in the first half from three-point range to ice cold in the second half. And the Rockets escape with a huge win against a team that is ahead of them in the West standings. I'm here with the great Ben DuBose. He's here with me on most nights, but we have a very special guest with us as well. You know, Adam Clanton on Sports Talk 790, the A team with Adam Wexler and Adam Clanton. They go from 2 to 6 on Sports Talk 790. And they're also simulcast on Space City Home Network from 3 to 6. Definitely check out Adam. Adam's been, a fixture in Houston sports for years now and a huge friend of the show. Great to have you here, Adam. But I'll kick it to you, Ben, first, and then Adam, chime in as well. This was a huge win when it looked like for sure this was an L by mid-third quarter.
Yeah, this was a massive win. And full disclosure, I am not in Houston. If my backdrop looks different, it's because I'm in Las Vegas for a few days, where, by the way, I did place a bet on the Rockets at plus 1600 to win the NBA title today. No, I'm not necessarily expecting it to cash, but I do think plus 1600 is a little bit of an overcorrection for a team that started the year at plus 900. So mostly for fun, but we'll see where it goes. And I am going to take it as a positive omen that the game after I placed that bet, the Rockets go out and take care of business against the Spurs team that entered at number 2 in the Western Conference. And one of many reasons I wanted to bring Adam in today. Adam, you've had some legendary rants against Victor Wembanyama in recent weeks. So before we get into the heroes for the Rockets, most notably Reed Sheppard, to a lesser extent Jabari Smith Jr., which some huge plays in that fourth quarter to help the Rockets rally back from 16 down. How fun was it, Adam, to see the Rockets in Houston storm back against a Wemby-led Spurs team and make the plays when it mattered late?
Well, you owed them one from earlier in the year, obviously, and yeah, all of my anti Victor Wembanyama rhetoric aside, I remember way back in the first quarter, when Champagnie was hitting every single one of those threes, and Reed was not hitting a lot of shots. And I thought to myself, man, what's it like to have a guy consistently hit 3-point shots? Now, I'm not saying Reed Shepherd's going to turn into that. But he and Jabari Smith Jr., what they've done in the last couple of days, bounce back game from Jabari against the Pelicans. And then, of course, this effort here by Reed Sheppard in the fourth quarter tonight. It's always good to beat the Spurs. It's always good to kind of get the latest laugh over Victor Wembanyama. Look, it's the fist pump heard around the world when he found out the Rockets got the number 4 pick. It's fine. The Spurs get blessed with another, number 1 overall pick. I can deal with that. I don't like that fist pump, man. You didn't have to make it personal. How it is for life. So when nights like this happen, I'm absolutely going to be beating my chest. And I think Rockets fans should too. And it's not necessarily because of all that kind of stuff so much as it is you battled back in this game. You didn't roll over. You were down 16. Nothing was really going your way. And you did 2 things that I think were really your identity last season that you haven't seen as much this year. And they have nothing to do with the offense. You were physical with Victor Wembanyama, and you played the type of defense in the second half, particularly in the fourth quarter, that gives you opportunities even when the shots aren't consistently falling. It was refreshing to see last year's team, or at least aspects of last year's team, kind of rear their head again here tonight.
Yeah, you guys talk about Wemby 5 for 21 from the field, 0 for 7 from three-point range. I think he was a game worst, not just team worst, minus 14. Very shocking. I mean, obviously the guy's, skilled and all that stuff, but Rockets really, he had nothing going tonight. I thought he took some bad shots and really got taken out of the game. Kind of amazing to see that. We got to talk about for sure Reed Sheppard because there's been a lot of controversy. Fans want to see him play. And, they've been very critical of Ime for having sort of a short leash because he maybe makes mistakes. The funny thing is Reed actually was missing a bunch of shots tonight, was kind of struggling for a while. Then he caught fire. And I really didn't think he made very many mistakes. Like, I think he would have had a short leash if he was, blowing some coverages here or there. I didn't see much of that tonight. And I think that's why Ime kind of stuck with him. And then it paid off in a big way in that fourth quarter when he stepped up big. Finished tonight with 21 points, was a team high, game high, plus 15. This is another one of those games. We've seen 3 or so of them this year, maybe 4, where Reed Sheppard kind of gives you that star-like vision. Like he is capable of more than he's shown this year.
Yeah, and I think it's particularly noteworthy that Reed has looked really good against the Spurs and the Nuggets. And in contrast to that first game against the Spurs back in the NBA Cup in San Antonio, when he made some tough shots, but he got exposed defensively, he held up much better defensively in this game. And by the way, I'll try and kick this to Adam more quickly because, again, I'm not with my usual setup. So if my mic or my connection isn't as solid as it normally is, my apologies. But to hit home the highlights for Reed Sheppard, I think the fact that he's able to deliver against the better teams in the West. Look, the Thunder are their own tier. The Rockets haven't beaten them yet, and until they do, it's fair to have concerns. They're the gold standard, not just for the Rockets, but the entire NBA. So we can put that aside for now. We can worry about that in April, May, and June. Hopefully, Fred VanVleet comes back at some point, or maybe Rafael Stone has a deal that he makes by the trade deadline. I don't know. We can worry about that for another day. What I do think is worth celebrating right now is that against the Spurs and the Nuggets, the two teams that have been most frequently linked to the 2 and 3 seeds in the West the last couple of months, Reed Sheppard has played really well against those teams. So it's not just like Reed Sheppard's taking advantage of the bottom feeders. The fact that he's able to get you these wins against upper echelon teams, not the Thunder, not just yet, but the fact that he's doing it against maybe the second and third best teams in the NBA, you can certainly make the argument based on the standings to date and the strength of the Western Conference, there's something to celebrate there. I think it's safe to say that Reed Sheppard, and to a lesser extent, Jabari Smith Jr., those are your ceiling guys. You know, losing Steven Adams really hurts because we've talked about, and Steven, we knew the other night, that was not going to be a grade 1 ankle sprain like we had seen recently with Tari Eason, Alperen Sengun, 7 to 10 days. No, when he couldn't put weight on it, it was pretty clearly going to be more severe, as he may acknowledge. And so you're talking weeks to months. We're talking about a grade 3. And Steven Adams, the data shows you, he's your floor guy defensively, but really across the board. He gives you, in his 25 minutes or so per night, a very high floor for, as a team, what you're able to do. There's more volatility with the guys like Reed and Jabari, but when they hit, Jabari always brings the defense and the connectivity, but when he's able to score 15 plus points, their record is elite, because he's already providing value in other areas. And then when he hits big shots the way he did tonight, when he makes threes and spaces the floor, he's a really valuable player. And Reed, there's so much volatility. You know, if it's a tough night for him and he's not playing well enough defensively to stay on the floor, then obviously there's not a ton of value. But nights like tonight, he looks like next-gen Steph Curry. And without your floor guy and Steven Adams, to me, the Rockets have no choice but to lean more into your upside guys, your ceiling guys. To me, the ceiling guys are Reed Sheppard and Jabari Smith Jr. I don't think it's a coincidence that when the Rockets have been at their best this season in November and October, when they went 13-4, that was when Reed was phenomenal. He dipped the last month, and so did the Rockets as a team. Now Reed bounces back, and what do you know? So do the Rockets. To me, you know, Reed's just 21 years old. He's just year 2, but he is the variable for this team. That's my take.
Yeah, and I'll touch on Steven Adams briefly before I get to Reed. I think, you know, it's obviously with the grade 3 you mentioned, Ben, that's just such a tough loss. You know, the double bigs lineup, what he provides just from a strictly offensive rebounding standpoint. If you want to have a positive in the first game you're without him, I don't know of a lot of teams you're going to have to deal with that they're going to provide more size. I mean, nobody has a Wemby, but I just mean from the sheer standpoint of if you want a blueprint on how to win a game without, you know, minus the fourth quarter comeback, without having Steven Adams out there, just point to the first game you had to deal without him being out there for the foreseeable future. If you ever have any doubts about being able to do it, it's not going to always go this way. And you had to have, as Ben mentioned, several heroes tonight. But at least you've beaten the Spurs team without him, and I think that's an accomplishment in and of itself. But going back to Reed, I know the offense is going to get all the love. How many insanely timely defensive plays did he make during that run? And it seemed to me, and maybe this is just, you know, me misremembering or kind of looking back on this game that just ended a few minutes ago a little bit too fondly, but it felt like a lot of those plays would come after he would miss on the other end offensively. He would come right back down and he would create a steal. He had a block shot at one point on Champagnie. It's just insane plays.
Yeah.
I said this on the air. I've said it a couple of times on the actual broadcast, and I've said it on our show. and I feel as dirty as you might imagine. And I'm not in any way, shape, or form saying he's in the echelon of a guy like this. But he does things that remind me of John Stockton. And it's not because he's short and it's not because he's white. It's because he gets his nose in there and makes these heady plays that, hate him as much as we all did and do still to this day, John Stockton did. Those are important, game winning and just winning in general plays that I think Reed does at times, even when his shot isn't falling. And that's what can make him redeemable. But I know we're also in the same breath talking about a guy who I have heard tens of people say, yeah, he gets hunted on the defensive end. So he's kind of Jekyll and Hyde to me. I'm just glad we got the good version tonight on both ends.
Yeah, absolutely. And, it's funny, you look at this tonight, the Spurs go 11 of 25 from three in the first half, 3 of 25 from three in the second half. I don't want to say they got lucky in the second half because they got very unlucky in the first half. The truth is somewhere in the middle. The Spurs have not shot well from three lately. So I'm not going to say they got lucky there, but on what Adam was talking about with Steven Adams, I am very concerned about this being, I think this could be months. And tonight you look at it, but the Rockets, where they beat you is they just kill you on the boards. They get so many more shot attempts. Tonight, the Spurs took 105 shots to the Rockets 83. The Rockets had a maybe 10, 12 free throw advantage, but that doesn't make up for that kind of gap. They lost the rebounding battle 57-55. They lost the turnover battle 14-9. The difference in 3-point shots was massive. But, their defense was hung in there, and they were solid consistently tonight as far as making shots. And it was just like the tortoise and the hare. They just kept plugging along. And once the Spurs started to go cold from three, that was the difference. But loved what I saw from Reed. As far as Jabari, Reed and Jabari are the guys who've been the most criticized lately. Jabari hit 2 clutch shots down the stretch that were huge, a corner three. And then I think he pulled up from about 17 feet, just beyond the free throw line for a big shot. Şengün hit a really big shot driving on Cornet. The replay looked a little suspect with the offensive foul, but still, that we'll take it. And this is just a huge win. I mean, they really needed this because I think there's going to be some games here where Adams' presence or lack of presence is going to be felt.
Yeah, I think specifically against the Sixers and the Pistons later this week. I mean, those are physical front lines where you wish you had Steven Adams. And this is not meant to be a shot at Clint Capella, who I think played pretty well tonight in his 12 minutes. But I think, some of the immediate reaction to the Steven Adams injury news missed the mark. You don't sign Clint Capella for this purpose. You sign Clint Capella, who's now in his second decade in the NBA, for purposes of load managing Steven Adams throughout the year. If he needs, half of a back-to-back off, if he needs to take a week off here or there, like when he had the minor ankle sprain a couple of weeks ago, you don't sign Clint Capella expecting him to be great value Steven Adams for 2 or 3 months. Now, that's not to say that Clint isn't valuable. Any minutes you can soak up over, 240 per game over the 5 positions, each plays 48 minutes, that's all valuable. But Capella is not, especially in the high leverage minutes, the solution. I think to match the upside of what Steven Adams gives you and that high floor, that high degree of competence, you have to err on the side of variance. Like, I don't think you can that frequently, especially against good teams, opt for what's basically a lesser version of Steven Adams and think that this team is going to have enough to win. Like, this team is good. It's not that good. It's not like a transcendent team from a talent perspective. So I think what's the ultimate end outcome for Ime Udoka with this team, you're going to have to shoot more threes. And maybe it's a blessing in disguise. We talked in the Thunder game about them getting out-mathed. And part of that was because, well, when you have Şengün, Steven Adams, and Amin Thompson, you're inherently not going to shoot a lot of threes. Well, now if you have to play Reed Sheppard more and you have to play Jabari at the 5, and when you play Jabari at the 5, then Tari and DFS. Tari came back tonight from his ankle sprain and looked pretty good, in my opinion, albeit in limited minutes. You have to play them more on the wing, and then inherently you have to trust Reed more at the point. And so all of these guys shoot more threes. And so to me, in the grand scheme, that's how the Rockets are going to have to try and overcome this. And there's going to be some games where it looks bad because if the threes aren't going and you don't have the presence of Steven Adams, it's going to hurt. But on the flip side, when the threes go in, as they did in the second half tonight, you can be really, really good. Is it going to be enough for you to be the 2 seed in the West? I don't know. I'm skeptical. I do think that the absence of Steven will be felt. But I think that's the way you should be looking at this. Clint Capella is still a valuable piece, but he's a valuable piece to soak up minutes. In terms of actually replacing the upside of Steven Adams, it's about Jabari, it's about Reed, it's about your shooters. Tonight it paid off. I don't know how frequently it's going to, but I guess coming off 2 weeks where they were like the worst shooting team in NBA history, they were due for one of these, right?
Yeah, there's some sort of happy medium in between what they were doing at the beginning of the year, which was really weird. They were leading, or they are up near the top of the league in 3-point accuracy, and they were taking like 5 a game. Not really, but it just wasn't a lot. So it was the ultimate efficiency, I guess, to where they were during that stretch you just mentioned the last 2 weeks. And Jabari was a big part of that, kind of like a struggle within a struggle. This is going to be where things get fascinating for me, especially if you're Rafael Stone, because you mentioned, maybe we've seen, rumblings that they're trying to talk to half the league, and you're in a weird spot because you didn't want to make a trade before Steven Adams went down just for the sake of making a trade. And I always felt, and this is not any sort of inside knowledge whatsoever, I have next to zero relationship from that standpoint with Rafael Stone. It's like a hello when I see him in the hallway. It's nothing. It's not at all like Daryl Morey. But I kind of always got the impression that maybe their way of thinking was, we're not punting on year one of Kevin Durant, but we're not going to move Fred VanVleet, who is really the only contract that can get you a big name back for money purposes. We're not going to do that just because he got hurt. So it's almost like they feel like, okay, we're going to go with what we've got and hope for the best case scenario, which is that maybe Fred can come back like he's talked about, which is like late March, early April, and just hope for the best. That doesn't sound sexy, but that's kind of the card they were dealt, or the hand they were dealt. And so I've always kind of thought that might be their way of thinking. I'm just curious to see if with Steven Adams going down, because again, this is a major rotational player that you're going to be without for months, maybe, if that changes their way of thinking or what the future holds from that standpoint.
Yeah, I mean, they only had 6 offensive rebounds tonight. Şengün had 13 rebounds, which is great. All 100% of those defensive. And what Adams does is he comes in and just creates those extra possessions. I think, this is a slightly different topic, but we thought this before even the game tonight, in some sort of way that doesn't really make sense. I think this is going to open up time for Reed not having Adams, because I think you kind of lose that superpower. And now you're like, well, we got to live with some of those Reed mistakes. And because like you said, Ben, the chance of him going off and having such, big games is there. So I think that's what we'll see as sort of a counter to that. We hope we see some more switching lineups in some matchups. Maybe Jabari at the 5, certainly Capella playing, but it's just I thought it was a really bad news when it came down, the grade 3 sprain, because I mean, hopefully he's back this year, but that's not even certain that he's, back even for the playoffs. I think 2 months takes you, I think it was put it out there today, that'd be 8 games left in the regular season if he comes back like 60 days from now. So hopefully he's back, but I think that's what they're going to try to do to keep this thing together while he's out, is hope that Reed gives you that sort of potential for huge games, and then, patch it up with Capella some and some with the small ball 5 lineups.
Although maybe, and this is admittedly me searching for a silver lining, you have no choice, at least with the way the team is currently constructed. Now, maybe something changes by the trade deadline, but the way they're currently constructed, I don't think you have much choice but to give more reps, more shot attempts to the younger guys, the developmental guys. Like, you have no choice in a game like tonight but to let Reed and Jabari sink or swim. And tonight, boy, did they ever swim. And so over the next couple of months, I do think that the odds are better than 50-50, unless he has surgery, and this is more than even a typical grade 3. You're looking at 3 months from when Steven suffered the injury in mid-January to when the playoffs started mid-April. So I would say, well, not a given. I think it's better than 50-50 that he's able to return this season, especially with medical technology the way that it is. And so there's a case to be made. I'm not saying for sure it will work out this way, but maybe, in the short term, you get a bump in your confidence from your young guys who you have no choice but to play and to trust now that you lose the stabilizing veteran force of Steven Adams. And so maybe the second half of the year, we talked in the first half of the year, clearly Amen Thompson, the last 20 games was better than the first 20. and he was very good tonight as well.
Oh, yeah.
Maybe Reed and Jabari take bumps. With Reed, it's sort of mixed because he was very good the first 20, not so much the second 20, but maybe in the aggregate, the last half of the season is better for Reed and Jabari than it was the first half. And then by the time Steven comes back, and Steven's a guy, he's going to do what he does. At 32 years old, with his experience, Steven's not going to change his style of play. He is what he is. It's more the players around him. And so maybe if you get Steven back, you get the benefits of Steven Adams when he plays, which are immense, but you have a more confident version of the young guys around him. Not saying for sure that's going to happen. And even if it does happen, like there's definitely going to be some games that you lose along the way when you look and say, wow, we probably would have won this game with Steven Adams. Okay, that's fair. But as we've said plenty of times, Dave, and I'm curious your thoughts on this, Adam. To me, this is a team where with a 37-year-old Kevin Durant, this isn't like last season where you're just trying to get to the playoffs or I should say last season, get the best seed you can and maximize every win over the regular season, where they got that 2 seed last year, locked it up with more than a week left to play. To me, this year's Rockets team, and by the way, they're not that far off. They're only a game back in the loss column of the Spurs and the Nuggets, who right now are basically tied for the 2 seeds. So it's all on the table. But for me, Adam, this is a Rockets team where even if they win 50 games instead of, say, 56 or 57, and you look at the regular season and say, wow, there's a lot of stuff they left on the table, a lot of games they lost because guys were hurt, yada, yada. If they get to mid-April and they're healthy and they have a 37-year-old Kevin Durant, the games are more spaced out, you get Steven Adams back, you have Fred VanVleet maybe back in limited capacity. To me, this is the kind of team where all that matters is the playoffs. As long as you get there, as long as you have a chance, then health and being in your peak form in April, that's what matters now, as opposed to last year. Last year was a team where because you were limited, you needed to maximize every last margin. This year, maybe it's not that way. Maybe you just get to the playoffs, and maybe this is all for the best at the end of the day.
Wex and I talk about that a lot, and we keep comparing last year to this year because it was the first time they participated in the postseason again, and the Western Conference mirrors last season so much this year in that. Speaking to your way of thinking, you didn't go get Kevin Durant to be the 2 seed on January 20th. You got Kevin Durant to combat wherever you're at on April 15th, because I don't think the Rockets honestly care about their seeding, and nor should they. And I don't think any team not named Oklahoma City, and they certainly don't care because they're going to be the 1 seed in all likelihood. I think every Western Conference would-be playoff team should approach it that way, because you're talking about a 2 seed and a 3 seed being separated by a game, probably more so this year than even last year. And so it's ultimately going to come down to, all right, well, what team do you match up against the best? And that's always the case in the postseason, but it just feels like there's usually been a little bit more separation between the seeds on any given season. I really think we're like on a collision course to a carbon copy of last year, where you're talking about 5 different teams being separated by like a half game or something like that.
Yeah.
And tiebreakers and all that kind of stuff is factored in. Just like Ben said, be the healthiest version of yourself when April comes around, and be playing your best basketball regardless of who's available when April comes around, and then let the chips fall, knowing that in all likelihood, you're probably going to be starting next year even more healthy than whatever you go into this postseason looking like.
Yeah. I would just want to make sure we mention the stars, or we're going to get some stands jumping down our throats. Kevin Durant tonight, 7 of 12, 18 points, 7 assists, 4 boards, was basically relentlessly doubled, and all kinds of pressure placed on Kevin Durant tonight. Şengün, 1 assist shy of a triple-double, 20 points, 13 boards, 9 assists, and as mentioned earlier, did have that big shot late, I don't know, maybe 30, 40 seconds left, put the Rockets up by 4. And Amen Thompson, as you mentioned, Ben, 16 points, 10 boards, 6 assists. I thought he had that one drive that he had down the middle, the drive and kick, which is what we've been wanting to see from a man. He kicked it to Reed in the corner, hit that huge 3. I thought that was great. Not just for Reed hitting the 3, but Amen, driving that as well. We can close with just sort of this. Rockets now they go on the road. They finished the 4-game homestand, I believe 3-1, going off of memory here. And they now play the Sixers and the Pistons in back-to-back. That's a tough combo, I think, for the Rockets, especially the Pistons, as physical as they are. You're not going to have Steven Adams. They can throw a lot of good defenders. Jalen Duren and Isaiah Stewart are physical defenders, I should say, at Şengün. What are you guys expecting as the Rockets head to this road trip?
By the way, one other quick thing to close on the standings tonight. The Timberwolves lost in Utah, so the Rockets are up to the 4 seed.
I didn't
The
know.
Lakers are down double digits in Denver, so the Rockets are getting some separation from the Timberwolves and the Lakers, and they're only a game back in the loss column of the Spurs and the Nuggets. So this thing is getting this ship is getting righted. Now the schedule's about to get more difficult, to your point, and the Spurs are coming back in about a week for a rematch in Toyota Center. So you certainly shouldn't victory lap, especially without Steven Adams, but the schedule is getting much more friendly. So relative to a week or so ago, this is a pretty fun time to be a Rockets fan, wouldn't you say, Adam?
Yeah, and I'll tell you, even though the schedule is getting tougher, you put in your time on the road. I know they're going back on the road, but a lot of these games, they're going to be against some of these teams that are contenders, or, some of the other strong teams in the West or just in the NBA overall. A lot of them are going to be in Toyota Center as opposed to going there. So even if you are shorthanded, I don't think that is overrated at all. I think that's something that, especially if you're, this has been like the weirdest start to the year I've ever seen for the Rockets. They've lived on the road, and then they'll come home for some random one game, one off, and then they're back out on the road again. That grinds on you. I know they're in 5 and 6 star hotels, and Matt Thomas is racking up the points and all that kind of stuff, and they're on chartered flights. But it's just something about being at home and being in your own bed and all that kind of stuff that I really do think home cooking is real, especially in the NBA. And if you're going to start talking about, players being missing from your rotation, well, you need all the advantages that you can get on your side of things. So let's see what they do. And like you mentioned, Ben, let's see how Ime Udoka adjusts on the fly with his rotations now that he's been dealt this latest hand. That's another fascinating aspect of the rest of this season moving forward that I want to keep an eye on.
And one other thing I meant to mention with the standings, the Warriors are getting blasted right now by the Raptors, 86-59 midway through the third. So that's going to drop them to 25-20. They lost Jimmy Butler last night to a torn ACL. To me, the Warriors are the one team that aren't in the top 6 that before the Butler injury, I could say there's a world where they could track down someone in that top 6. Now, I feel like barring like a catastrophic injury, the top 6 in the West is pretty set. Like, I'm sorry, the Suns are a feel-good story. I do not see any world where the Phoenix Suns catch one of the top 6 teams in the West.
What about the Clippers, though? They're starting to come strong.
They have 24 losses, though. The most losses in the top 6 are the Timberwolves and the Lakers with 16.
Blazers are hot, too.
Blazers are the team that I like. Man, you talk about a free throw merchant. If he's going to get that whistle, they're going to be a problem.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And it's a team that's playing really, really well. Obviously, the Rockets lost to them twice, but it's a great point by Adam as well. I want to see how this team does do on the road. They lost to the Kings twice. They obviously got lost to the Blazers twice. Pelicans, Clippers. Like I said, although the Clippers and Blazers are definitely hot lately, it's been on the road where they've had some games that have looked ugly. So I especially want to see Jabari perform well there. It's great to see Jabari break out of this slump and start to play better. I thought he was really good tonight, but I want to see this on the road. And these are two big matchups. As far as East teams, they're strong teams, especially the Pistons. The Pistons have given the Rockets issues for a little while now. So I'll be curious to see how they match up against each other. Anything you guys want to say before we close up? Huge win by the Rockets tonight.
Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead.
Adam, I'll tee you up for one more Wemby rant because I know that's what you're known for. And I can't help but reflect, like, after all that's been talked about the first half of this year, the split between the Spurs already passed the Rockets, yada, yada. The Spurs now are 30-14, and the Rockets are 26-15. There's a 1-game gap in the loss column. And Wemby, as you mentioned, Dave, he was 5 of 21 tonight? Is that right?
Yeah, 5 of 21.
What's rubbed a lot of people the wrong way. So Wemby obviously, got in, he threw his shade at the Rockets on draft lottery night, and he's had his, ethical hoop statements of late, being a statesman for the league, despite the fact that not only has, he not won a championship yet, he hasn't even been in the playoffs yet. I mean, we're talking about them being the 2 seed halfway through a season. He's talking about the ethical hoops comments and somewhat the context of Oklahoma City Thunder, because that's who they were playing at the time. I mean, the Thunder just won the championship and Shea's the MVP. And that's the frustration with Wemby. It's like, you can say all that stuff and that's fine, but until you've actually won at the highest level, it's going to rub some people the wrong way. And in the case of the Rockets, when you factor in the backstory of the 23 draft lottery, of course people in Houston are bitter. I guess that's what frustrates me about the whole Wemby narrative, and especially with the Spurs fans. They'll say, "Oh, why do Houston fans care so much? Why are they so bitter?" Yeah, we're bitter. Like, the victory laps have been nonstop since he was drafted. He's, thumbed his nose at the Rockets multiple times, and that's certainly his right. But it's like, if you're going to be the heel, then when the Rockets beat the Spurs and Wemby in a big game, then hell yeah, we're going to have fun with it and we're going to rub his nose in it. That's how it works. That's how fandom works. And so that's my frustration. Wemby can be whatever he wants to be. I have no problem with that. I love, heels in sports. I love what Carlos Correa has been this decade for the Astros, except for the 3 years that he was gone. But, Wemby, I have no problem with him speaking his mind, but it's like, especially if he's going to do that before he's won a title, and then the Rockets win a big game like this. I mean, the fan base has every right to be a little bitter and rub it in his face, right?
Well, and don't forget, he did not play well in this game, and I think if you listen to, Vanessa Richardson asked Alperen Şengün directly after the game, how are you guys able to kind of contain him? And he said point blank, we were physical with him. And I do wonder, if I were there tonight and I was in the Spurs locker room and I was able to ask Wemby some questions, the first thing I would ask him is if he thinks he played down to his competition tonight. Because that's another thing I don't want to hear guys saying. I'm guessing he didn't have that quote tonight. I'm just guessing.
Yeah. But it is true. That's how you slow him down. I mean, I felt like Dylan Brooks was the Wemby stopper if anyone's going to be. He was so good at just getting up under Wemby and causing so much problems for him. They started out with Okogie tonight, moved a bunch of different defenders on him, and really shut him down.
One more thing, not to interrupt you, Dave, but
no, you go ahead.
Imagine a Rockets-Spurs game where they don't turn the ball over 15 plus times, and they were shooting well tonight, but they couldn't hit anything in that first game. It felt like Spurs were hitting everything in the first half, and the Rockets kept turning the ball over, and they were even doing that as they were trying to make their comeback. They couldn't quite get over the hump, and I was like, is this going to be one of those games where they run out of gas just making the comeback? But credit to them for making the plays down the stretch. I'd like to see both teams play a clean game next week on Wednesday, and then let's see what happens then.
Yeah, this rivalry is all the way back, man. I love it. That's great. So good to have you, Adam. Honestly, I love it, man. It's great. Everybody knows Adam Clanton for sure, but the A team with Adam Clanton and Adam Wexler, you can listen to it from 2 to 6 on SportsTalk 790, and also simulcast on Space City Home Network from 3 to 6. Great to have you, Adam. Ben, as always, as well. And we will be back Thursday when it's Rockets-Sixers. So appreciate everybody for tuning in, and we will see you guys then. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, guys.